Welcome to Movie and Beer, everybody. This is Dan bringing us in, and we have our wonderful co-hosts and friends with us tonight as we're talking about a really interesting movie about music.
A fantastic movie, great movie. I'm Aaron. I'm your rushing expert. I'm rushing. I'm going way too fast. I'm rushing.
And I'm Blake. I'm your dragging expert.
Dragging.
And I'm Brian.
Who's just on point and sharp and just on time.
And
Brian, was that your intro or not?
That was perfect.
Was that your intro or not?
So
yes, I'm flat.
We watched this super amazing film called Whiplash, which has some amazing actors in it, and it's about jazz and musicians. And
I'd say it's about obsession, but
it is
ambition,
obsession,
and jazz.
And it's all about acting and music and framing. And this film does a lot of really interesting framing, visually, auditorily, and we also had an opportunity to just grab some beers out of the fridge.
For once, I went for the odd man out, and I'll have something to say about the other beer I had.
We did some 10-barrel pub beer as the go-to because we had a lot of it, and we just wanted to get rid of it.
Well, this film is so complex.
You need something not to distract.
And so interesting, we didn't want to distract.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. But I will also venture a beer that I could have had with it that might have fit very well later in the podcast.
All right, we'll talk about that in a little bit later. It's in a really ambitious
2015 film called Whiplash.
Whiplash, about an ambitious young jazz musician who's a drummer who goes to an elite conservatory in New York, which is a made-up place and not a real place, because if they did the real place, they would probably get fired or
sued. But for Tableside, it is...
But think of Juilliard.
Prestigious.
Very prestigious music
and the instructor,
program.
Who is like the instructor, can go into any class at any time and just pick somebody who he feels has the je ne sais quoi, the thing that makes them special. And
is good enough to be in his varsity band.
Correct.
Right.
And so that's what this is about. It's this young man figuring out his place, his passion. How hard does he want to get pushed? Because he knows straight up, and from the start,
the instructor is abusive.
He's very physically, verbally abusive.
And his claim is that he's pushing you beyond your limits to make you into the great musician you could be.
Right.
Correct.
And you will never attain those goals without the external abuse and force to help you meet those goals.
And that's what he deals with, is knowing, do I not?
Do not plot spoil if that's
I'm
what you're...
not gonna. All right. So, this is not necessarily a new
this
movie.
This is clear
old
from
enough.
the first scene.
Yeah, true.
You know he's going to be successful. You just don't know how he's going to get there, and the journey in learning his place. And he even, when he tries to start dating while he's in music school, and then figures out, I need to focus on one thing right now.
Well, that's one of the times that Fletcher really starts to push him, when he starts to prod and really build him. He got the spot on the studio band, had that confidence to ask out the girl, and then, he points out, I know this band, this drummer from this song in this pizza place. Fun fact, that was not a real piece or a real musician.
Just made up.
It was it's just the orchestrator of the album, the who just made a piece for it. But
that's kind of cool.
Oh yeah, it's great. The music's beautiful. The whole movie's packed full of beautiful music. But that's the first time you see him like, okay, I'm feeling confident. I can ask this girl out. I can do this. I can play this music, and it starts off, okay, you're here, it's fine, and then quickly becomes just scary, and you see Fletcher's true colors.
So our main protagonist, our main character is, I would describe, like an insecure overachiever. He's definitely trying
he's
to be
a freshman.
Yeah,
he's a freshman in a music school.
Amazing music
19
school.
19 years old.
And has all this ambition that I would say if he was easily satisfied and happy, this comes into play with the main character's romance. It would change some of the direction and some of the decisions that the character is making. Dan, I think you were going to jump in and say something else.
I think that this film is very, very narrow. It focuses on two characters,
Yeah.
They have the interaction between those two characters as the focal point and the decisions that each of them make to help push the other and or ruin the other, and then come back around and be like, okay, yeah, you do have, let's spoil it, at the end, you do have what you need. I've pushed you enough. You've now learned enough egotistical attitude to push back because I think I'm great. And what are you? And he actually asked him that, like, are you good enough to be in this band? Do you deserve the place? Do you deserve it? And
he has said a couple times, I earned it.
Yeah, right. I earned it. I'm here.
And it comes to a point where he doesn't have to say it anymore.
Yeah, he just earns it. And I think that is the antithesis of the whole film, is just these two characters, how they drive each other, and then how then it plays out. And we'll talk about this a little bit in a few moments about the visual cues and how the framing is wide shot, static shot, close, mid, where the focal points are, how the focal changes. I think this is in a phenomenal, and this is why it got, nominated for a lot of awards.
Like it won 93,
not just the acting.
93 awards.
Yeah. This is an amazing film. While it has no green screen or blue screen or anything, it's just music and actors portraying themselves.
Well, and I want to say, like Dan, you mentioned, this focuses on two characters and the interplay and the dynamics between them. Listener, don't take that as anything at all discouraging. Like this movie is fascinating, even though it's
riveting from the first frame.
Yeah, and I would think, like, if I was listening to this kind of naively, not knowing the film, only two characters, how do you make that interesting?
That does smack of My Dinner with Andre, which is an interesting film, but not terribly encompassing. Whereas this film,
this covers a genre of music, and they talk about the greats and the people who came before, and how do you achieve that? How do you get to that level? And they even talk about a former student who was at that level, who killed himself because he couldn't handle the stress, the anxiety, and all the things that were put onto him to push him to get to that level.
Right.
And the teacher admits to that. He's like, yeah, I know, I pushed him. That's my job.
Even though he tells the class he died in a car accident.
Yeah.
Which, again, it just shows how
messed up.
The term hero and villain don't fit for this movie. Protagonist, antagonist really do, and Fletcher's pure antagonist.
Yes.
I just realized a minute ago, you don't see him smile until the end, and you only see the corner of his eyes like move as he's like finally Neiman gets it, but you never see him actually smile.
Well, it was finally earning the approval.
Yeah.
Finally earning approval from this teacher.
Yeah.
But I think our main character, I don't want to plot spoil.
This movie's at least 10 years, almost 10 years old.
But the main character very well could have died in a car accident too.
And he almost did. And he almost did.
And it's like, what are the sacrifices that you make? What are you willing to do
art.
for your art? How much do you bleed?
Yeah.
It
is clear
literally and figuratively.
The main character is willing to go all the way.
He really is.
All the way.
He wants to be one of the greats.
Right.
And you have to bleed for your art. I mean, you just and he talks about that. There's some dialogue in the film about like you have to sacrifice. It's not about the music. It's about you sacrificing to the music and allowing it to encompass you and become you. And then at that point, your life doesn't matter because you've become the music.
So there's this recognition of excellence that's present in so much of this film. Everybody knows who's got the chops and who doesn't. And even things that to my ear, like, I can't hear the difference, between, somebody that's been castigated and not, because I'm clearly not at that level. But let's talk about the dinner scene and how
the dinner scene
and how the expertise here is completely lost to that people that are just so far outside of the music world.
And they have different metrics for success.
And they have different metrics for success.
Let's take it back for a second and explain what the dinner scene that you're talking about is. So, set the table for us, as you will.
Okay, so the main character,
well done,
the main character as a freshman goes to this music conservatory. He earned his way into it either through scholarship or tryouts. And this is the first seasonal dinner, and his family.
He goes back home for
goes,
Thanksgiving dinner
goes,
or whatever.
Back home.
Yeah, and his dad, his uncle and aunt, I guess.
Yeah, and his cousins.
And so his mother's not there, so he's just dealing with his dad, and his dad's not defending him. And you have all these other guys his age, the main character's age, come in and it was like, oh, he's playing football and he's doing this or that.
He's in Model UN, like all this stuff that's
his
I guess
two
more,
cousins, one's a quarterback or something.
Yeah.
and one's like a collegiate, like
collegiate on the Model UN.
Yeah.
In college.
Like more traditional, I'm using air quotes, more traditional like success parameters.
Right.
Yeah.
Versus like this is a prestigious school. Like, I understand it. I have friends who go into this stuff who are like, this, oh man, it's a big deal if I get this. And I read up about it. It's like a very narrow pool that they can take.
One of the 12 best in the country.
Yeah,
The best in the country. And the U.S. has a lot of people in it. Sure.
But
that's huge.
But I understand that. I'm just
Aunts
guessing
and
from
uncle?
I'm guessing from the face. Car salesman uncle doesn't get that.
They don't. They're in Jersey. They don't care. I
He's
mean,
waving limp asparagus around.
yeah, little limp asparagus. I pointed that out as soon as he held it up, and it was a limp asparagus. I'm like, oh, that's what they're saying.
Yeah, their metric for success is being the high school quarterback and then going on to hold a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah.
Yep.
They don't understand music. They don't. Their perception on what it is and how it plays a role in society is much different than those that are doing it.
Yeah.
And how it means something to them. And this is a great dichotomy that's expressed in the film. And I think, so again, visually, static wide shot or medium shot on that dinner scene. It's like, we're going to let other things have impact versus there's so many close shots where the focus is really narrow.
So
on a drum strike,
on something, and again, I'm going to keep going back to that because that's what this film, I think.
Well,
what I have read on is
I noticed
have now
some
witnessed is what
technique throughout the film.
Yes,
in all of the kind of intimate, non-confrontational scenes. So the date scene, the dinner scene, and the meeting between the protagonist and antagonist in the bar.
Yeah.
like Act 3 of the
Act
film.
3. So all of these scenes, most of the background is very soft focus.
yes, soft focus, fuzzy,
And a lot of times it's a two-shot where you see both characters on the screen.
yeah,
Right.
And then all of the school shots, especially when they're doing the music number, the backgrounds are in focus. All the members of the band are in focus.
Yes.
Everything is extremely precise, just like jazz. You say that jazz is improvisational,
No,
but it's
really not.
Big,
some of it
band,
is.
big band jazz.
Some of it is
extremely
on
precisely.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And also the point of view of the shots are either from the director's point of view or looking at the drummer close up or then looking at the musicians from the drummer's perspective down the row. A lot of it is perspective, I think, and that really plays into, and they do a lot of quick change shots, quick cuts to music, that point in the music that they're playing, and that point in the music, and what it is it's allowing the drummer to see what the musicians are doing and how he can hear and sight read what the musicians are doing versus seeing it on a piece of paper. And I think that's really ultimately what he then becomes, because the end quote unquote concert is he gets pulled up on stage and is not told what they're playing. They play something he doesn't have in front of him and he just has to improvise. And he fumbles really hard. And then he's like, all right, you know what? I'm just going to run with this. This is my show. I'm going to run with it.
He's going to truly earn it.
Yeah, he earned it, and everyone followed his suit, because if you're the lead and the drummer, the rhythm section of the band is the lead, it's either going to be the piano or the drummer, and the piano didn't start. He's just like standing back going, oh.
He didn't know. It was chaos on stage.
It was.
What was happening until the drummer pulled it together.
And everyone was looking at the drummer going like, what are you doing? And I think really that really brings everything together towards the end of the film on saying there's a point in time that you have to make that decision. And this is really what it's about, is making that decision, like who I am, what I am, and this is here I am, and I'm going to own it. Instead of letting the world revolve around me, it's going to be me.
But it's also the point when he starts pushing back on this abusive teacher.
Well, yes.
And
Right,
he
he
takes
comes
control.
into his own.
He comes
He
into
owns
his
it.
own to recognize, like, no, he has this moment where he says, like, I don't suck. And like,
Yeah. And I don't know. I'm gonna stop digressing. This has been a really interesting film because all of us here at the table have either played an instrument or sang or done something with music at some point. So we
had a band
understand.
director who wasn't an abusive POS who threw chairs at me.
Yes.
Or symbols.
So I think we all have an interesting perspective and appreciation on what's being presented, and knowing that the only way you can grow is to be challenged.
I will say, on the point of challenge, it was a challenge to get through some of this movie. I said out loud, I think halfway through, this feels like I'm watching Uncut Gems again, which had me tense. My shoulders, like, I don't know if Brian, you caught it. Like,
was
but I was like up and back. Like, my heckles were, I don't like this. I hate this. But then I said the word earlier. The catharsis at the end when Andrew does take that back and says, "No, I'm in control now. I got this."
Yeah.
It made it all worth it. It was really good. It's a lot of yelling and being mean to people.
Yeah, so
the 5-hour session really messed me up.
Dear listener, if you haven't seen this and you're triggered by abuse,
Or
Don't watch
conflict.
it.
A lot of conflict.
emotional, primarily very
This is an abusive film.
abusive emotionally.
Yeah.
If you
Well,
can't,
it's
if you
tough.
can remove yourself, it is a almost beautiful take on like getting what ambition. He moved his bed into the practice studio and just had the poster and just went until he had to dunk his bloody hand into a ice pitcher of ice water.
That's a lot of drumming.
It's so much drumming. Like
Yeah.
it's
it's
insane.
bleeding for your art. I mean,
Yeah.
it's I'm taking it so seriously
Which-
that I don't care what happens.
Which I would love
to me
more
to
if it didn't
grow.
have a psychopath screaming at him.
Well,
I think there's a philosophical question in this, though, of what sacrifice do you make and how much can you give for expertise, for true excellence?
Yeah.
at like the highest
Before
level.
it eats you alive and you kill
Versus
yourself.
There's I won't spoil by saying, but there's a couple of characters in here that say, well, just good enough is good enough, and if you're happy and you're loved and you have these relationships in your life,
That's good enough.
that's good enough. And the idea is like, yeah, is that good enough? But our protagonist, at least through the first part of the film, definitely
want
says
that.
it is not,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you don't get remembered after
No.
your death
Yes.
for that. And
He had a great
there-
line.
well, I was going to say there's ethical stuff that's come into that too. Of what are you willing to do ethically, to other people's careers to try and advance.
Oh yeah, him accidentally, quote unquote, putting down that sheet chart for the other core guy.
well,
got
it's like
swapped out.
losing a book of music, but then also our protagonist goes after a
Yep.
professional's career in a really serious way. The teacher goes after our protagonist in his career in a very
It gets
serious
really
way, too.
cutthroat.
Towards the end, it's very cutthroat. It's like, here, let's get you on stage, and I'm
Right.
just going to set you up for failure.
And really, the question is, does the end justify the means? Like, are you willing
That's a
to
good
do
question.
these things?
Well, and this has been one of the central debates of this film.
Yeah.
Is do the ends justify the means?
Right.
And is the abuse worth it if the end outcome is a great musician that never would have been great without this abuse?
And that elevates the whole culture.
And that even gets brought up towards the beginning of the film. It's like, they did this and they did that, and I wouldn't have been Bird if the symbol wouldn't have been thrown. at me.
Charlie
yeah.
Parker wouldn't have
And-
been Charlie Parker if he didn't have.
I'm
yeah.
gonna regret saying that later on, but we will digress. There's a lot of really interesting topics covered in this film. For those that are just casual movie watchers, may go over their head, may not understand it. It may be like, yeah, whatever, it's a music film. I think if you have an understanding of music, be it whatever, as a musician or a singer or a performer of any sort, or you have family or friends or spouses that are and understand it, and you have an inkling to understanding what it is to be a musician and what it takes to practice and perform.
I would say an athlete.
think- and
Anybody
the
that
same.
practices, anybody
Yes.
that pushes themselves, anybody that has a limit that they try and advance. I think they'll.
This
Shoot,
film,
I'd
this
put-
film is for you.
I'd put brewers in that camp. Like you don't get better at brewing by not brewing.
Correct.
You don't
Right.
get better at for myself, like writing and doing anything creative
Everything
unless you
requires
take the time to
practice.
do it.
Hoplash. It's the
Yes.
movie beer of the year.
Was it multi or hoppy? Smack, smack, smack.
Yes. Play it again, Smacks. Play it again, Smack.
Throw it again.
You're too fast. No, Smack. You're too slow, Smack. Yeah, no. It's
How
too
many
hoppy, not
IBUs?
hoppy enough.
17?
Yeah.
Slap, 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 slap.
Yeah.
Don't you ruin my stout.
There is, yeah. From a standpoint
Sorry, I'm just making a
of,
quick note. We're going to make this parody trailer.
there's absolutely zero violence other than the main character getting smacked by the teacher, the other character.
There's the violence he inflicts on himself by drumming
Like-
until his hands are falling to
That's not
pieces.
violence.
There's
That's violence.
dedication.
Emotional
He's hurting
violence.
himself.
It's
No, yeah,
emotional
this-
distress.
This
Yes,
is all
it's
violence.
emotional trauma.
So,
this is all
so I'm
emotional,
saying,
yeah.
what age range is this appropriate for?
I'd say, and not until you're
High school?
I'd say high school.
Post high school for me.
I'd
it's
say
like,
high school if they're emotionally intelligent.
I mean, there's so much over about this movie that would go over a
I don't
teenager's
think
head.
it would be enjoyable.
Yeah,
to
right. They would
my-
get bored
my
really
si-
fast.
My 16, 17-year-old
Right.
nieces and nephews.
I think you
Yeah.
have to try and find a vocation in life and make it on your own for a little while for this film to really resonate. Like
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the and not that you could watch it younger, but you wouldn't get as much out
You
of it.
wouldn't. There's, I think, a lot to be said for having a film that's actor driven, that's not special effects, that's
yeah.
story driven,
Character
driven, where the characters and the actors portraying those characters carry it from start to finish.
Yeah. So
I made the comment. There was literally no intro credits and outro credits. There's just a slight this is the school at the beginning. And I asked Brian, I was like, why? Well, okay, I've not seen a film get away with that.
yeah, so the very first shot of the film is down a long hallway, and the protagonist is on a drum kit in a lighted room,
Yeah.
and the vanishing point is
Him.
him
Do we
on
remember-
the drum kit.
Do you remember what
And
he was
it slowly
practicing?
tracks in.
Yeah.
Do you recall what he was practicing? Was he doing swing time?
No.
Is that what? Because Fletcher walked in
Yeah, I think so.
and then just vanished like Batman.
Yeah.
And and that kind of sets off the whole. Boy, I keep thinking about that 5-hour practice session.
it's
This
hard.
movie's intense.
if you know anything about rhythm and drumming and stuff, this is an amazing film because
Yeah.
they really portray how hard it is to keep time, not be slow, not be too fast, and keep it at the tempo that it's supposed to be at for
Yeah.
everybody else to match. Because the drumming, the rhythm section is what sets the course for all other.
Well, and the
people in the
endurance,
band.
the endurance to keep
Oh,
going
yeah.
and keep going, and the physical strength and stamina needed to do
Yes.
some of these drum fills for not just a short time. To keep going at incredible speed. That's got to be so taxing on your arms, on your everywhere on your body. Really,
That's why he keeps telling them practice, practice, practice. You have to just be able to maintain regardless of what you're being asked to do.
you got to be an animal,
Right.
An animal.
For a second here, let's talk about the 3 Oscars the film did win, because we can talk about the technical accomplishments of the film based on those.
Sure.
It won Best Sound Mixing, which most people don't know what that is.
I buy that.
Nor do they understand how to recognize it in this film, and I'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
It won Best Editing, and it also won Best Supporting Actor for J.K. Simmons, and the acting was fantastic.
Yeah.
I would also say the reason I saw this film first was because I'm an editor, and a couple of my editor friends said, "You've got to see this." And there were 2 songs in particular. The first time we heard Whiplash, and the final finale. The editing was amazing.
Phenomenal.
And your first editing assignment in high school or college, make a music video, and everybody knows to cut on the downbeat, the 1 of the 1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh.
And you do that, and magically, whatever crappy music video you
It
make,
doesn't matter. Still looks
it
good.
looks great.
Yeah.
This editor knew his jazz, knew his rhythm, knew his tempo. He cut syncopated. He marched around and showed what everybody was doing, and all at the same time. Cut to close-ups at the right time, offbeat. He built momentum and tension. Did a great job, but he would have never done that had the director and the cinematographer not provided him the shots
Correct.
to cut with.
Yeah. So all 3 of them, everyone needs to know and have awareness of that skill set and know, hey, I need to have that B-roll. I need to have all that footage available because I think this is going to work. given the raw materials.
Right,
And that's really what filmmaking is about. It's not about a single vision. It's about a team. And I think
Right.
And
that's
and the
really-
editor
Team called the Avengers. Wait, sorry, I blacked out.
figured out how to use all those shots and pace it correctly so it helped support the rhythm of the film.
Yeah.
In the concert, you see, Brian, exactly what you're talking about how the attention moves around the entirety of this like 25-person jazz band, and there's no point in the song where you don't see what everybody's doing. You know, I loved the way that it would, you know, show a close-up of like a couple of drum strikes interspersed with, you know, some blood on the cymbals, and then you would see the brass section as they came in,
And a really tight pan.
and you're right, and the timing on it was impeccable.
And then the
Impeccable.
whip pan between the protagonist on the drum kit and
the antagonist shaking his hand.
shaking his hand.
Shaking his
no,
hand.
No.
It wasn't even. I'm sure it was on purpose, but it wasn't moving fast enough to keep up with the music.
Right.
And there's
Right.
one of the key moments, the key conflicts was like the drummers aren't drumming fast enough. Of the choice of three, none can go fast enough, and the camera can't even keep up.
Yeah.
For
But
the
you see,
song that he finally got
it's-
into.
In a way, it was kind of the protagonist and antagonist were like striking each other in that moment.
Yeah.
Because it was like a tit
It was
for tat.
battle.
It was battle. And the camera was panning back and forth between them in a beautiful way
Yeah.
to kind of show strike, counter strike, strike,
Yeah,
counter,
yeah.
you know, parry.
beat me to it.
So why would we convince somebody who doesn't know music or understand music to watch this?
Because
Oh,
the
wait,
voice of
wait.
the
I want to talk about sound mixing real
Yes,
quick.
yes,
Okay,
let's
okay,
do that.
okay.
And,
Let me-
and then
let's-
we'll
come
get
back
to there.
it. We'll
So
come back.
there are three things I want to talk about.
Yes.
In the final scene, there is a point where the music protagonist is playing his drums on an amazing drum solo, and the music fades to white noise.
Yeah.
And all that's left is him and his motion and the image.
It doesn't matter
of
what he's
him.
doing. He's just doing it.
He has become his craft.
Yeah.
Yeah, Aaron made a good. Like you said something about that. How
Flow.
He's just, yeah.
He
It's about the flow.
Was in the flow, and so that's sound mixing.
Yeah.
That guy made the choice to
Draw
bring
it
up
out.
the white noise.
There was a
And
practice session we saw that
break the
too,
music.
where there was a kind of a drone that came up with a different
Yeah.
song that led us into the next scene.
Right.
It was over the band starting the practice of the next song.
Right. So
and that's it.
there were times when the score, the background music, you couldn't tell whether that was score or whether that was music actually coming from something in the scene.
To transition,
And
yeah.
and there was this scene where Aaron's talking about it started with score and then it became the music and then something happened and suddenly the music was muted. So it was almost the protagonist in his head thinking about what had just happened to him.
which is a great way to like show on a screen an internal psychological event.
Right.
You know, there's so much about this movie that's about these two characters and what's going on between each other, but also their internal journeys. So, well, the protagonist more so. But I thought that was a great way to show kind of what's going on with what our main character is feeling. I was blown away by that.
And like I said, there were many times throughout the film where it wasn't quite clear, was it music in the movie or was it score or was it a bit of both?
There was a lot of crossover between
And
what was
a lot
being
of crossover.
played,
Yeah.
and then how that then bled into the next scene and how that was carried over. They really totally deserved an award.
Yes,
for that, right?
yeah,
'Cause that's-
absolutely.
I've never seen a film like this. I've never seen anything that is so focused on character driven, acting, the story, so confined. I mentioned at the beginning, like the close shot, medium and wide shots were so utilized, and the fixed focus versus you things are framed really, really amazing in this film. It's
Really
like,
tight. And there are often moments where the main character is kind of segmented in his part of the screen.
Yeah.
And the screen, the world suddenly becomes much smaller.
Kind of boxed.
Boxes him
Yeah,
in.
a lot of the stuff that I've read about this film focuses a lot on describing that and why that's important and how that plays into both the music score and then how they approach telling that story, because they're internalizing it versus are you understanding the story from the person on the screen and their perspective, because they're really just focused on what they're doing at that moment.
It's telling me all he has space in his life for physically and mentally is whatever fits the drum set.
Correct.
He can't fit in a girlfriend. He never sees his dad. He just all he has is that drum kit.
Well, speaking of the drum kit, a lot of times in movies, you'll see a character when they say play a piano, they'll walk up to the piano and then their hands are out of scene.
Yeah.
And then there's a close up of just hands. And then you see the character again with their hands. Here, I feel
Dude's
like it was
playing the
very
drums.
believable. Every actor and actress felt legitimately like they were playing their instruments.
Yeah. J.K. Simmons plays the piano.
Miles Teller
Miles
had
Teller,
been
yes.
playing drums since he was 14.
Yeah.
So there was
So
actually there's a
he
couple of
was
shots.
actually-
There was a few shots
He's
according to
legit.
IMDb. There's a few shots where there is a double, probably for like
the
know
really, really complex shots. Yeah.
possibly, but like it's him. Like
Yeah.
he's been playing drums. Like the bloody hand thing was because when he learned I guess the wrong way. Because the way you hold your drumsticks, the left hand, it has to hang on the meat of your
Yes.
thumb and forefinger.
Yeah.
And, index finger. And doing enough of that, it's going to wear it down.
Yes.
I'm
And
doing
it
motions
hurts.
for you guys. The podcast can't see it, but like imagine the meat of your
Yeah.
thumb and forefinger.
Imagine the meat of your hands,
it-
listener.
If you touch
Touch it.
something against it, and yeah, it's
So yeah, he actually does drum, and a lot of that was him drumming.
But this touches on the third award, which was Best Supporting Actor. The acting through this film was phenomenal throughout.
the
yeah.
girlfriend gets it.
Yeah, J.K. Simmons knocks out of the park. And I was looking at all the other nominations. Miles Teller doesn't get a 1. It's all J.K. Simmons.
Yeah.
And I
Which
don't know why.
'Cause I thought he did great. I don't
I
like him
agree.
personally, from what I've read, but like Teller does a great job. So
It's well done. I think he tells the story from his perspective. That's what the main driving when stories are told on film like this, you have the person telling the story and everything else. And I think a lot of this film is him telling the story and then a few scenes of it being told around him.
I don't think any scene doesn't have him in it. There's
It
a couple
doesn't.
of shots.
There's
yeah,
a couple
but-
of shots that don't.
but,
so it's
yeah, every
either
scene
him
has
telling
him.
the story or it being told about him and he's in the
Yeah,
shot.
yeah.
And it's like, these are the things impacting you. And so we're going to show that.
There's a sort of side story about a former student. I think we mentioned who had killed
Sean
himself.
something.
And I think we see the moment where the teacher gets that phone call and he's in his office. He's saying,
Yeah.
"Not now, not a good
Yeah,
time, not now."
yeah, yeah.
Was there any sort of character development with that teacher? I don't think I saw any of the teacher of like, am I pushing my students too hard?
No.
Well, it was undeveloped because he
My-
lied about the reason.
Yeah. He's a
He
jerk.
told other
Yeah,
students
he's,
it
he's
wasn't
self-obsessed. He's self-obsessed.
Yeah, but
to make
I
himself
felt
better.
in that moment he thought he had made a mistake. And I think that the meeting in the bar, he admitted it to
Yeah.
To Andrew.
Andrew.
But he
Yeah.
also knew why I got fired. And it's because you spoke up. Because I kicked you out of the band and kicked you out of the school because you screwed up.
Yeah.
Even though I set you up. So it's a really hard catch-22. It's like,
Well,
yeah,
and,
I'm
I
gonna
mean,
do
we
what's best
could
for my
argue.
career.
We could argue if the final scene was J.K. Simmons setting him up,
I think it was.
Oh, yeah.
or was it the final test?
No, I think it was a setup. I think
it
he
was a
was he was there with no sheet music. Our main character was there with no sheet music, set up to fail.
Yeah.
And he really did fumble through the first song. But the second song, our protagonist, I guess this is maybe a spoiler. So turn your sound off for 30 seconds, listener, if you don't want the spoiler. But yeah, the protagonist takes control, shows his chops, shows his expertise. And I think there's the smile and nods of recognition from the teacher in that last song where he begins directing the drummer of like, slow the tempo down, take it down, then build it back up again, build it. I think that was a kind of reapproachment where the teacher finally recognized, okay, you're good enough.
Or
I don't have to push you anymore.
Or if we make the argument that the teacher was just self-absorbed,
Yeah.
Oh.
then
That too.
it's finally validation that his method worked.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way. Oh, man.
True, because the guy gave up. He's like, I'm going to push you to the point of you either continuing and destroying your life, which the previous person who he had done that to killed themselves. You're either going to destroy yourself or you're going to become that greatest thing ever. And it's like, what right does this person have to do that to other people.
But the student wants it. Andrew
And
wants it.
He wanted it, you would assume that they all want that. If you have that drive and ambition, and you know you're that good, the only way I'm going to improve is to have someone push me.
Say I'm here for a reason. Say it. I'm here for a reason.
I'm here for a reason.
I do like that they had a couple of drinks at that bar, but no beers though. We had
No
beers.
beers. We did have beers.
Smooth.
Smooth transition.
Well done, Blake. Well
All right.
done.
That was a
now
lot of
is-
effort and
Now
winded.
is the time of the podcast as we're like
When we
closing in on
seamlessly transition to our
transition
beer drinking.
from talking about Whiplash.
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 There we go. I
As
swear I'm
a-
hearing an F in Dan's
Whiplash?
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
No,
Flash?
it's whiplash.
Yeah, Whiplash.
Whiplash. I say
Like you get in a
Whiplash.
car
You're saying
accident.
You're saying it wrong.
I'm saying it wrong because I'm
that a
from
Nebraska
the Midwest.
thing?
It's a
Okay.
Nebraska thing.
Oh, okay. I thought I was going crazy for a
No,
second.
no. That's just how I say it.
I'm going
So
crazy for different reasons.
this was a film we picked out, and we're just going to go with what we have in the fridge.
Yeah.
And I think my friends Ryan and Bill, if they are listening, shout out to you for providing me.
Your
extra
Ninkazis are
beers.
foamy.
Your Ninkazis have foamed out, and yet your pub beer did not. So I was a little worried that they might be heat struck, but it's cheap beer, and it doesn't really matter at this point. I knew that this was a complex film.
Yeah.
Because I had done a little, I'm going to watch the previews a little bit and see, all right, how and what do we do for this? And I was like, let's just do a simple beer. And our friends gave us some beer. And I'm just like, hey, let's just do what's in the fridge. I
Yeah,
don't
something
need
that
to-
won't distract.
If anything, listener, if you're going to watch this film, don't drink anything that distracts you because this film deserves your attention.
I have an interesting argument once we get to the one I had, the second one. But let's talk about pub beer first.
10 Barrel came up with a clone recipe of a fairly well-known popular beer, which I'm not going to mention because I don't want.
Does it
promotion.
rhyme with Spud Might?
Yes. Well, no, it's not Bud Light.
Does
I'm gonna
does
say
it
that
rhyme with
straight up.
Schmudriser?
No, it does not.
Does it rhyme with Bill or Bite?
It is
It
an
rhymes
older,
with Moors.
It is an older beer that's been around a long time. They got a clone recipe.
Cold
They made
Berman.
it, and because they have money at the time that they started making this beer to dump a lot of money into making a cheap beer.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of the grains are what you would call adjuncts and not actual grain. An adjunct being something you add to it to just give it sugar. So it's fermentable, and this is a 5% beer. I don't even know how to classify this. What do you guys? Is this a pale ale?
It's a lager.
It's a lager.
It says so on the can. The incredible can art where it's just the words on black
It
text on
also
white
says
background.
cheap fun.
cheap
Yeah.
fun.
Cheap fun beer.
I
Okay.
like to think of it as a craft beer's way to get the Bud Light crowd into what they're into. Like it's relatively affordable. It tastes about the same.
All
I
right.
love it.
It says, and Aaron, are you going to read the side of the can here in your radio voice?
Made in a facility that I can't
Processes wheat.
I don't have good light. Made in a facility that processes wheat. Beer questions call this number. Blah blah blah. Best before can. Wait, where's our marketing copy?
There's no
I
marketing.
thought that was
copy.
part of the marketing
That
copy,
is
guys.
the
I can see
marketing.
them saying blah, blah,
It's
blah.
literally black and white. Says 10 Barrel Brewing Pub Beer Lager Cheap Fun. That's
Yeah,
literally all-
cheap fun.
cheap fun. So this is normally 5%.
Brian, that was your nickname in high school, wasn't it?
No comment.
This is like clear gold in color, little white
Mm-hmm.
head, foamy. Your aromatics are going to be like, oh, this is a craft lager, and it's just really cheap fermentation. It's just like they used corn and rice. It is a mix of those, from what I can taste. I could be wrong, but that's what I taste. And so this is a clone of a mass-produced beer. They're like, hey, let's mass-produce a beer and put it out there cheaply. This is like less than $10 a 12-pack. I mean, it is cheap beer,
But
it's locally made.
the word basic has kind of a negative connotation, so I'm going to use the word uncomplicated.
Yes.
It did not distract from a fairly complex film.
Yes.
Right. And I think it matched well for that because honestly, I wouldn't want something that was like really, this funky, Belgian or like, anything really complicated. Because the movie, for me, it felt like it was demanding so much attention.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So
There's a lot going on.
I'm not going to bleep myself out, but this is like a clone of Bush.
George H.W.?
Rhymes with mush.
Bush.
Rhymes with Kush ball. Back in
Okay,
the 80s, baby.
Yeah, they found a clone recipe. They made it, and it's actually a good beer.
This tastes better than Bush, dude.
It is.
Yes, it does.
It's a lighter cross between PBR and Budweiser. So I'm going to say those words, and I'm not going to bleep myself out. But I'm saying, if you're going to drink cheap beer, at least drink something made locally in
Yeah.
Oregon.
Yeah.
This company is not owned by AB InBev anymore.
No,
It is
they're
now
owned by a large
Canadian,
large cannabis
Canadian company that owns a lot of cannabis stuff. So I think yes, it still feeds back into the economy a little bit. This is the fermentation is clean, the flavors are clean. It tastes like corn and a little cereal.
Yeah.
It is really thin and dry. It dries out a lot on the back, and which is nice. And lagers should do that. They shouldn't be sweet on the tongue unless you're doing a pilsner. And this is not a pilsner. This is just a standard like a Helles lager.
Yeah.
This is perfect for a picnic.
And I would say it was kind of light and crisp, just like the precision of jazz.
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah, or the ride cymbal.
Yes.
Or a chair flying through the air.
Or a chair throwing at your head, or various other things being thrown at your head.
Yeah.
So Blake, tell us about your other option.
What was your
So-
for this evening?
We knocked out a few of these, and I was getting squirrely, and I grabbed a Nikasi Tricerahops
Yes.
double IPA.
Thank
And-
you, Ryan and Bill, for bringing us a random package of other IPAs.
So-
and unfortunately, these were not necessarily settled.
Which is fine. So the bitterness IBU is 84.
Yes.
Alcohol by volume is 8%, so be careful.
A little strong.
Available year round. It does really kind of kick you with the hops. That's why I don't really like a lot of Nikasi. It's very hoppy, very bittery forward. But it says here on the can, notes of floral, citrus, and resin. I did get some citrus. Not as much as I'd like, but there was some on the back. And I would argue this went well at the end of the movie once you kind of got a feel for, okay, I see what's happening. I know what's going on. That final like performance. Because that's when I had mine was after it foamed everywhere. Andrew saw Fletcher at that jazz club. Fletcher invites him out. And then we get that final confrontation. I thought worked well because after all this movie of, you're watching this kid get berated and beat down and just try to move on with his life.
Once
And now he's
once
back.
they move from a student and teacher relationship to more peer and peer.
Or
Like-
enemy and enemy, yes.
Well, yeah.
Adult
And
enemy
that's-
to adult
and,
enemy.
and that's really what it is.
There you go.
Equal rivals.
He walked into a
perhaps.
club and saw him on stage, and he's like, "I'm now your audience."
Which, boy, the double take Fletcher did was pretty good.
He's like, "Oh, oops,"
the kid who got me fired.
pretty much.
And Aaron, you don't have to do the whole thing, but if you want to do any of at least the first couple lines.
All right. Well,
Because Nikasi has a delightful little thing about the Tricerahops.
they always do really good marketing copy and visuals.
Ninkasi Triceratops Double IPA is not for the faint of heart. It's a behemoth of a brew that stomps through the land of IPAs like a hop-loving dinosaur on a mission. Each gulp is a stampede of flavor, with double the hops pouncing on your taste buds, leaving a trail of bold, resinous bite that's perfectly paired with a cunning citrus ambush. I almost said blood because of all the blood on the...
Yeah, there was so
Hopteris
yeah.
Park.
I think
good beer.
So,
I've,
yeah,
I've had it a
I
number
like
of
it.
times. It's year round.
It's not my favorite, but I think it went well at the end of the movie. But I would agree, drink something real simple. At least if you're gonna
most
if
of
you're gonna
the
change
movie,
it up.
yeah.
Otherwise, keep it real
So,
simple.
what about non-beer drinks? Like with gin and tonics? Like what else would you...
I think a bourbon. I feel like a slow sipping bourbon would work with this movie.
Gin, because gin has a little sharpness to it, and you're going to get
Ooh, that's
sharpness
true. That's true.
out of a lot of the music if you know and understand music. and
Frankly,
follow along what they're doing.
Frankly, a full-bodied
Yes.
wine wouldn't be terrible at
Yes,
this.
correct.
Oh.
I would actually say you wouldn't
I
want to
drink
do a
wine now.
red. I would do like a white or a rosé with this because it's
a
gonna be
little
lighter.
soft. Yeah, it's a
gonna
little
be softer
soft.
around the edges. If you want something full bodied in your face, I mean, yeah, you can go there. This is a heavy movie. This is not a starter film. You have to understand music. You have to understand
I disagree.
filmmaking a little bit.
I think
Human emotion.
Music adds a whole
emotion.
lot, but I think if you were an athlete, or I think if you
Correct,
had, or if you went to
correct.
law school,
Yes.
or if you're
Competition.
like pre-med, if you're in anything that's
Ooh,
intense
yeah.
competition, I think you'll find a lot that resonates and a lot you'll understand.
A restaurant chef.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, I
Watch
would,
the bear.
I would venture to posit that anyone who's at the top of their field
can understand
would
what's going on.
understand sacrifices that need to be made.
Would you say they would see J.K. Simmons as the protagonist and Aaron Newman as the antagonist?
You're like, you're teaching me.
That little
I
turd.
wanna-
That little turd isn't appreciating what this maniac's doing for him.
He had a single tear that came down when he was challenged
coward!
versus
Gordon
that-
Ramsay's favorite movie.
Oh my god!
I will say that I have had things thrown at me
Jesus.
Really?
on the job.
That's a
Yeah.
bummer, dude.
Wow, I've never had that happen. I've had
That's-
people throw stuff at me, but not on the job.
God, I think I would walk out if anybody so much as swore at me. Like that's never happened.
Yeah.
Same.
Well,
I've
creative
witnessed-
pursuits.
I've witnessed
are
violence at work.
Creatives are
While
weird,
I
man.
was not the person that caused it, I did witness it, and I was like, "Why am I here?" That's a crazy thing to have happen in the workplace. And I think so. This is a different. It's not a workplace. This is a learning environment. This
Right.
is a school.
Well, that's true.
True.
So there's a certain
That's
amount of I can get
true.
away with stuff in the. Why on earth would a teacher let another teacher just walk into their class
Clout.
and say, "Do this"?
It's gotta be cloud.
Just
So
turn
I don't
around
think
and walk away.
conservatories don't give tenure, right?
There's no tenure. You're all just there.
Because I know professors with tenure get to do whatever.
Yeah.
There is a pecking order, though. Fletcher and his band are clearly money makers. They are clearly at the top.
Oh,
of the,
true,
of the
true. They're the ones that
hierarchy,
get the grants, and
they're
yeah.
the ones that get the grants. And so I think he has had free reign for a long time at that school.
You can just
It's
come
the
in
music.
anywhere,
It's the
just-
music version of Roll Tide. Just
Yeah.
colleges that have winning football teams that get all the money. Yeah,
Yep.
I like this better because I like jazz better than football.
You know, this would be almost a football movie, though. It could be.
Rah rah rah.
Were you on my first down or not? Smack, smack, smack.
Did you run your route short or long?
There you go.
Throws a football at his head and he catches it. That's how it works.
So again, Whiplash is the name of the movie. Really amazing film. It's been around. It's been out since
2015.
2015. Really well done. Filmography wise, I mean the cinematography, the visuals are pleasing. Nothing
Right.
is sharp. There's a few cuts. There's a lot of really great framing.
Right.
Music wise, as you said, this won an Oscar for its music. I mean, the
Yeah.
music editing and the scoring is amazing. If you understand jazz or understand music a little bit, you really watch this film. I think it really emphasizes the importance of understanding creativity, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but being able to control your situation and how you learn and what you learn and that direction in being pushed
Yeah.
is not a bad thing if it's done in a controlled environment and not just somebody going crazy on
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah, yeah.
All of these characters are incredibly well written. All of
Agreed,
the decisions that they make, their motivations that they have, the outcomes that they want, they all make sense in the context of these characters. Kind of like, pub beer all makes sense in balance of
Yeah.
what it's meant to be.
Exactly. As a simple pub beer, as a lager you can just drink. It's up there with all the simple other lagers you can get. You'll probably find it on draft cheap. Get it in a tall boy or a short can.
Dan,
It's not an expensive beer, but it does fulfill the need to have something to drink while you watch a film.
Fletcher said it in that bar. All these quote unquote Starbucks jazz albums, and they don't have the real stuff. You could get like a Starbucks quote unquote a Bush beer, but why not support a proper local and have some real jazz with pub beer?
Yes, exactly. Brian, thoughts?
Here's my thought. Another beer I thought might go well with this film is Ill-Tempered Gnome.
Oh, geez.
Ill-tempered
Here
gnome.
we
I
go.
dislike it already.
For one thing, it's thematic. It
Yes.
reminds me of J.K. Simmons.
He's a regular height.
He's a short.
But it was also let's see.
Peaches and cream. He's just peaches and cream. That's exactly what he says.
If it's so, Ill-Tempered Gnome is a beer that's done
in
seasonally.
Eugene, Oregon. It's a winter beer, Oakshire Brewing.
Ooh, I like Oakshire.
They have a tap room here in Portland. I've recently had Ill-Tempered Gnome, but as a barrel-aged version and not the standard version, which was really incredibly strong. But you brought this up for a reason.
I did. It was far more bitter than I enjoy.
Yeah.
But I actually thought kind of that bitterness went well with J.K. Simmons' character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say the beer is pretty one note.
Yes.
And that note is bitter. And therefore, it's not that distracting. So I thought it would have gone well with this.
It goes with all the other notes in this movie.
Yes, it does.
I get a
Also,
lot
J.K. Simmons is 5'11".
yes, he's short. I got a
I'm
lot.
5'10", dude. It's not short.
I got a lot of dry corn, and it really dries out on the back. Like it just sits a little bit sweet on the mid front, and then it just drops off dry. And I appreciate that. And from a not distracting standpoint, there's pretty much zero hops. I mean, there's a little bit of bitterness, but it's more like hop cone resin bitterness.
It'd be bitter if you don't ever drink beer.
Yes, it would
Yeah.
be bitter if you're not a standard like, oh, I like IPAs. I want to be bitter beer face all the time.
If you don't run a highly successful beer and film podcast.
Yes, and our friend Brian is a really good judge of these because he's not a bitter beer drinker, and I
True.
appreciate you saying that it does taste bitter because to me it's not.
Interesting.
But I would say it probably is to people if you're going to drink something equivalent, be it Dos Equis or Corona or Bud Light or Coors or whatever, a standard American lager that you can find out there cheap.
Yeah.
I say this one, the flavor profile is stronger. It's also a little stronger in alcohol. It's 5%. Most of those other lagers
no,
are below 4.
I was talking about Ill-Tempered Gnome as being very bitter.
Okay. Well,
The pub beer was fine.
The pub beer was balanced.
so
It was balanced.
So it's
Yeah,
just
there you go.
okay. You can
And
just play at the mid-level
and
studio
uncomplicated. Yeah.
uncomplicated.
Just the base beats.
Yeah.
level.
I was just talking some alternatives since we really only tried one.
So
Yeah.
I'm curious, like where do you place this movie in the realm of like best movies, worst movies? Like for what we've done this year, I'm going to call back to RRR. I really enjoyed watching that. I really enjoyed Sisu. Five Obstructions is one of my favorite films ever, and I almost think this is kind of in that same echelon of being the cream, la creme de la creme, as
Yeah,
Fletcher might say.
I agree. I think this is definitely top 10, maybe top 5.
Yeah, this is one of the more elevated films. we've
Yeah.
had.
It's
Yeah.
intellectual. It's visually challenging because of the framing and the way that visually it's been produced and approached. Auditorily, I think this is probably one of the best, if not the best,
Very engaging.
scored music and engaging. The dialogue is not drowned out in any way. Everything is up front. The characters drive the story front to start. I like beginning to end. I'm like, it's all
I'm never
storytelling.
confused in the film.
No,
so it's
not at any
it's
point.
not complex in that way. But it gives you a
Sometimes-
lot more extra time to think about
Anybody
subtext.
who makes anything simple is hard.
yeah.
And this is a very simple movie because there's no special effects. There's nothing to distract you from the actors and the music. So the music and the score plays a role. Like that is the third character
Absolutely.
that drives it completely because you hear people screw up.
Damn
You
caravan.
hear them be successful. You hear them screw up again. You're like, can you identify as antagonist kept saying like, you're too slow, you're too fast, you're too slow, you're too fast. It's not my tempo. It's just like,
Well, even the intro scene where he berated that trombone player,
yeah.
saying, "Are you flat or not?" insulting him really personally, and then pointing out, "I knew he wasn't flat. It was you, other guy, but didn't like that he didn't know."
But if he didn't know, he doesn't deserve to be here.
Yeah, if you can't hear yourself play and you
Right.
don't know where your tone should be, you don't need to be here because I need people who understand who and what and where they are from that perspective. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's being a teacher and teaching people how you've not grown as a musician. You're not self-aware.
You could do without the fat jokes, though.
Yeah, I thought that was a little berating and
The whole movie he's berating.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, yeah,
that
a lot
was-
of abuse.
That
But-
set up his character.
Like I agree with like what you the not the method, but like the end goal, sure. But like don't smack a person, be mean to him. Also, for films this year, I'd put in the same place as Face Off.
Oh, shit.
I had to look
No.
through and see what we've done this film this year. Mighty Python and the Holy Grail,
Yeah,
Renfield,
yeah.
Over the Top.
We've done some interesting films.
House of
over the
Flying
last
Daggers?
Year.
Oh yeah, that was a good one.
When this
That
year,
was a good
when
one.
this
I
film
like
came
this
out.
better.
Yeah, I would say it again.
Scott Pilgrim versus
So-
the World.
So we're gonna
stop.
kind of wrap this up and say, if you enjoy music, if you want to be engaged, if you're an intellectual person and like to be challenged, if you're a competitor of some sort, you'll understand what's being presented.
If you're
Really?
someone, if you're someone who would call J.K. Simmons daddy,
Yes. Which he plays a father role to most of the people in the film. And he really pushes that hard from an emotional standpoint.
Like
an
mentor.
abusive father.
An
He's
abusive
a
It's
mentor.
like the
mentor.
Great Santini.
Yeah.
Yeah, Yep,
check this
exactly
film
right.
out. And again, we're not saying don't watch it because of those flaws.
Oh
Those
no,
aren't
no,
flaws.
no,
They're not
absolutely
flaws.
watch it. I'm
That's
just trying to point out, like, this guy's a
part of-
monster.
part of the character and how it's driven and how it's set up. So thank you for hanging in there and listening. This has been a wonderful episode. I think this is a really challenging film in some aspects, and I think it's also an educational film in some aspects.
I think it's just it's an emotional journey.
Yes.
Yeah.
I still don't know if I'm rushing or dragging.
This is a great film. Check it out if you haven't yet.
Yeah, definitely. I had never heard of this film. I will say that.
Really?
I had to watch the previews beforehand and be like, oh, this looks interesting. This is why it was recommended. I was out of the loop when it came out. I obviously am not connected with like good cinema.
jazz movies. So Dan, let me ask, based on your research with the trailers and what else you had read or whatever you'd read, what does for your expectation and then the reality of the film, like how does it riff? How does it riff differently from the other guys here on the podcast? You can't see listening, but they're drumming. They're hand drumming.
I'm
I'm conducting you, goon.
They're conducting an air drumming as poor Aaron is trying to communicate.
I'm trying not to be distracted by my. Oh, okay. I'm rushing.
Oh, geez, he's rushing.
So how does it meet your expectations?
I think it met and exceeded what I had read about it. I think I was really looking forward to, as I had mentioned to Brian when we started watching it, I was like, hey, I read this breakdown of the film, but it was really focused on the sound and the visuals and not about the story. And it really focused on how well done both of those were and how they played roles with each other and how they utilized fixed focused, small frame, large, medium, and large frame, and like either a static film or there was even a couple of handheld scenes but they were super close in. So you saw the frenetic action on the screen from the perspective of the person.
I'm not doing a joke here. It was like the Bourne Identity, but for like a guy with a just mental crisis.
Yeah.
As
The
he's,
trombone
like, just
player
freaking
has
out,
to
yeah.
grab his trombone in his case and leave the room.
I'm talking about when like he brought in the other guy and Andrew's like walking out all pissed
Yeah.
off and it's just shaky, slams the door.
Yeah.
All you see is like his midsection. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like high marks, I think, all around.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
2 drumsticks way up.
Yes. And don't forget your drumsticks in your rental car or at the rental company
Or in your
God.
car accident.
or your car.
Jesus,
accident.
Murphy.
Yes, because that would be bad.
A lot of stuff happened.
All right. So, as always, the opinions expressed during the taping of this recording are those of the hosts. And we want to thank you for hanging out and listening. This was Whiplash. Really amazing film. Find a beer that doesn't distract because you're going to want to listen. You're going to want to pay attention and watch what's going on the screen. It is a little bit longer of a film, but that's okay.
It's
Dan?
worth it.
Dan, were you hydrating or dehydrating?
I did not hydrate. And I
Were you hydrating in my stage?
I'm dying now. And you can channel all the J.K. Simmons.
Now
you
throw
want.
in a
You
chair
can
throwing
yell,
sound effect here. Crash.
Crash. Yes. So, gentlemen,
This is Aaron. Thanks for listening and sticking with us, dear listener. If you're playing, play on.
This is Blake. I was going to do a whole like J.K. Simmons as the yellow M&M thing, but I'm just going to say this is Blake. Bye.
And this is Brian. Thanks for listening. I'm sorry.
Are you wrapping up the podcast or ending the podcast?
end it. End it. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll catch you on the next episode.
Crash, fall, sad.